as we move through this gospel lesson, there are many things that bring up perhaps Bible verses that we learned early on in Sunday school. There are lots of words that intrigue us, that invite us into deeper conversation around neighbor and enemy, around love and hate, around the ways that we are called to be in community and care for one another. I always worry a little bit, though, that at the end we get this line, this tag-on line that says, "Be perfect, as your Father, your parent in heaven, is perfect." And I think at that point, most of us say, "Nice ideal. I'll try again another time to live this out." We, in a sense, let ourselves off the hook a little bit because we recognize that ideal of perfection is so far off. However, today I want us to rethink that word and what it means for us in terms of living this out. For you see, the word teleosos, that is used on this is one that many of us have heard applied in other ways as telescopes, even tied to terminals. It is the ending point, the fulfillment, the accomplishment. And so as we are hearing this, it's not about perfection as having to live every single second in every single action, right? But rather calling us to live fully, completely, richly, and deeply in this one who then rests in the holy, in the wonder, the mystery, and the groundedness of God. So what does it mean if we say, live fully, completely? As your Father, your parent in heaven, is fullness and completeness. It begins to change how we think about this text and how we are invited to live fully and richly and deeply, completely. It becomes a journey rather than an action after an action or a way of measuring us by a moral code. To think of ourselves as being on a journey in which the goal is entering into or knowing the completeness and the fullness of God. Of course, the journey to get there, as Jesus points out, is a challenge. It's not something for the weak or the faint of heart. He knows all of those different things that have been put out there culturally and societally. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He knows what has been put out there for those who are rising or raising their enemies or raising their armies for war against their enemies. He's living in a culture that has now been dominated by empire. And Jesus is saying we've got to live a different way. We need to be a different people that are not about raising the stakes of army against army, that are more than words of hate flung at those who oppose us. Rather, there needs to be a way of building community and caring for those on all sides, of loving our enemy as we would love ourselves, of loving the stranger as we would love ourselves, of loving our neighbor, our kinfolk, as we would love ourselves. Perhaps many of you, like myself, have enjoyed some time over the last couple of weeks watching the Olympics. But in the midst of that have been drawn into watching what has been happening in the Ukraine. And perhaps you, like me, were intrigued as you watched Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Greek Catholic priests walk into the center between those who were the protesters and those who were the military guards and the police. walked into the center and prayed, who would walk to both sides to make sure that those who were in the military were being cared for, as well as the protesters, who encouraged people to bring tea to the people on both sides that they might be cared for. What does it mean for us as a people of faith to step into that middle ground, what I tend to think of as the vacuum in our culture, and to say we are going to fill that space? We are going to be the bridge between the haves and the have-nots. We are going to be the bridge between the Democrats and the Republicans, the independents and the socialists. We are going to be the bridge between those who can't stand GLBT people and those who love them dearly. We are going to be the people who draw one another together. What does that mean? This is an incredible witness that all too often we fail at. That we're not willing to risk ourselves or our comfort. Think of those priests who knew that in that moment they were putting their lives on the line. Violence could erupt at any second from the protesters. Violence or shots could ring out from the side of the military. And yet they went into that place to say our witness is greater than what message either the president of the Ukraine or the protesters have. We dwell and we live deeply and richly in the promise of one who calls us to live in love and in fullness, completely.